If you've spent any amount of time in alternative conspiracy circles, you've probably heard of Benjamin Creme's Maitreya. I've mentioned him a few times in my videos as well. I would like to take a second look at this figure. Here's a brief outline. Benjamin Creme, an Englishman, claims to be in contact with an entity called Maitreya, who he claims talks to him primarily telepathically. Sometimes he refers to it as being overshadowed by Maitreya. Creme claims that Maitreya is the Theosophical Society's world teacher, which that organization has been talking about and waiting for a long time. And that, like the world teacher, he is supposed to be the same entity as Jesus and Buddha and Krishna and others, which he calls the Christ principle. Creme claims that Maitreya has now prepared himself a body and lives in London, and will be starting his public ministry very soon, which consists of, quote, showing us the way out of our current difficulties and bringing the new teachings which will guide humanity towards its next evolutionary step, end quote. In fact, in a recent post on Benjamin Creme's Share International website, it says that Maitreya has just begun his public ministry by appearing on American television, although Creme refuses to tell anyone what name he is doing these interviews under or where people can watch them. Creme has been using the same tactic for 35 years, which is to take out big advertisements in major newspapers and make bold claims, like a few decades ago when he took out full-page ads in major newspapers claiming, quote, the Christ is now here. In the past, he's even made claims like the one he just made recently. Like in 1982, Creme claimed that Maitreya would announce his existence on worldwide television broadcasts, and that he would do that on Monday, the 21st of June, 1982. And again, he has done the same thing when he recently put out, this time television and radio ads all over the world, claiming that a star sign in the east would herald Maitreya's public ministry very soon. So the pattern has been the same. The more outlandish the claim, the more publicity. And then, when it doesn't happen, Creme just comes up with a lame excuse to why it didn't. Here's an example of this from a recent publication of his magazine Share International. But first, a little background. One of Creme's early publicity stunts was in regard to the date July 31st, 1985, when Maitreya did not appear to the reporters who had gathered. Creme said that cosmic evil forces prevented him. In a recent article written by Creme in a question and answer format, where Creme writes a question for himself to answer like Blavatsky used to do, he mentions the 1985 incident when referring to these recent events. It says, question, I remember when the journalists were waiting for Maitreya in London with Patricia Pitchin, the 31st of July 1985, when apparently the hierarchy decided to move forward and was attacked by evil forces, specifically those from outer space, those called cosmic evil forces. So hierarchy had to shield the Earth, and some moves in the reappearance had to be postponed. Now that Maitreya has moved forward, does that imply that our planet is more shielded against intrusions from cosmic evil forces as a consequence of permission given from divine levels of our planet and beyond to permit hierarchy to work without being interrupted? Answer, no. Maitreya took advantage of an opening of a window of opportunity at a given time. Creme has appeared on many radio shows and other interviews over the years telling people about Maitreya. Creme basically claims any miracle or weird occurrence that happens in the world is because of Maitreya. For instance, on his website, Creme claims that the ending of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall were just a few of Maitreya's peace miracles. It seems that many people are concerned about Maitreya's being the Antichrist. Even people that are not Christians seem to know that if this Maitreya was anything more than a figment of Creme's imagination, he would obviously be the Antichrist. When they hear a description of Benjamin Creme's Maitreya, they say, oh, you mean like the Antichrist? A case in point is George Norrie of Coast to Coast AM, a man who very much disagrees with biblical Christianity, when he says, upon hearing Creme describe Maitreya, that it sounded an awful lot like the Antichrist to him. He also said he got a weird vibe from Creme. The point I'm trying to make is that the Bible says that almost everyone, and especially non-Christians, will not at all suspect this Antichrist to be the Antichrist. They're going to think he's the real deal. But with Maitreya, absolutely everyone suspects him to be the Antichrist, even before anyone's ever heard from him. There are many other things about Maitreya that I will mention in a moment that don't add up to me at all. Frank Lordy, who I do the Frank and Chris show with on Wednesday nights, and I have been theorizing about this for quite some time, and it seems to us that this has all the hallmarks of a deception of some sort. And I'll talk about the specifics in a second, but first let's look at some possible reasons why this deception would be done. Number one, at the very least, it is nothing more than someone like Jordan Maxwell or Michael Tsarian, who have a certain skill in speaking and basically spread the message of Luciferianism to people that have recently shattered their paradigms and are therefore very vulnerable to new programming. In telling people about Maitreya, Creme always makes sure to slip in the key component to the externalization of the mysteries, in my opinion, which is that Jesus was just the Christ consciousness, and it will be the same consciousness that was in Buddha or Krishna that will be coming back in the future. Now, whether you believe in Maitreya or not, this is the message that will prepare the road for the real Antichrist. And it doesn't matter if Creme is proven to be a fraud or not, as long as he keeps getting that message to audiences all over the world. Number 2, it could also be another form of misdirection or sleight of hand. If people focus all their energy on thinking that the entity that Benjamin Creme has been promising to show up for 35 years is the Antichrist, then they're not likely to keep looking. They would also look pretty silly when, once again, Creme is proved to be a fraud. I should say on that note that Creme has constructed this in such a way where he basically can claim anything is a result of Maitreya, like I mentioned, the fall of the Berlin Wall, etc. But, in addition, he is equally ambiguous when it comes to who Maitreya is. For example, he claims that Maitreya will not use the name Maitreya, and he will not claim to be Maitreya, so unless the person specifically denies being Maitreya, Creme gets to act ambiguous and not say yes and not say no as he has been doing for so long. But I do think that Creme in his late years has painted himself in a type of corner with this latest stunt. So let's take a look at it. Creme, following his usual pattern, put out a bold press release and a corresponding ad campaign, this time on major television and radio networks around December 12, 2009, claiming that Maitreya would show himself very soon and that he told everyone to look for a star sign shining brightly in the east. He also worked in the main theme in the 30-second ad, which was that Jesus was the same as Buddha and Krishna, again a very key psyop. Then, he put out a recent press release saying that Maitreya's public appearance had actually begun. Creme said that Maitreya had appeared on American television, although he refused to say where people could watch it. Oh, and of course he said that Maitreya was not using the name Maitreya. Now this of course led people to looking all around the internet and checking their TV guides to see who had given the first interview on American television on a major network at that specific time. This led people to Raj Patel, who certainly looks the part, and other than a slight stutter problem, has a very convincing speaking demeanor as well. The kicker was that Raj Patel is talking about the very thing that Creme said Maitreya would, which was the waste of food resources and how to distribute them to those in need. Mr. Patel has a book that he is promoting about this very thing. My personal opinion is that Creme did want people to think it was Raj Patel, even if just for a little bit, to keep Interest and Share International going. After all, he could always not confirm or not deny it, as he had always done, unless Raj specifically denied it. But I don't think Creme knew it was going to be as big as it was, and that it would eventually require a public denouncement of Creme and Maitreya from Raj Patel. The reason that I say that Creme wanted people to think this is because of Creme's reaction through all of it. When it was suggested that Raj Patel was the Maitreya, at first Creme did his usual thing, just keeping the hype going and being ambiguous. Eventually, Patel outright said that he basically thought Creme was a wacko, and now, in a recent audio interview, Creme did, with obviously a great reluctance, say it wasn't Patel, and he also seemed genuinely surprised that it had become so popular. In more recent developments, Creme claims that Maitreya has now appeared 11 times on American television. Creme claims that Maitreya is about to do shows in other countries, including Japan, Europe, South America, Russia, and China. And when he does, Creme says he's going to speak the languages of whatever country he is in. In a recent publication, Creme does his usual type of thing, gives little clues as to where you can find these interviews without actually telling you anything of value. Some of the clues are, number one, that they are high-powered television interviews from major TV programs that via the internet Maitreya can be heard and seen by millions at the same time. Number two, he says that all the interviews are on the same channel so far. And number three, that they are all about 30 minutes long. So the wild goose chase begins. But this time he digs his hole deeper. After all, I'm not sure how many American television talk shows Creme thinks that there are, but pulling out a TV guide and seeing which major show has interviewed the same man 11 times at 30 minutes a pop about food shortages and spiritual truth is not a hard thing to do. I can't figure out why, if Maitreya's message is so important to the world, why Creme just doesn't provide a link so we can all be enlightened and get this utopia going. The answer is obvious. So, let's look at some of Maitreya's so-called miracles. For example, the star sign.